Suzuki has described his life as a series of metamorphoses. The Canadian schoolboy who discovered his past only through anti-Japanese racism, the celebrated geneticist who replaced his passion for the tiny fruit fly with a concern for the whole world environment, the science professor who left the ivory towers and lecture halls for the public world of television. David Suzuki writes about these changes in his autobiography, which is called Metamorphosis.
David Suzuki is with us now. I've just got to ask you a question about fishing, first of all. A great picture of you inside here with a beautiful salmon,
yes.
26-pound salmon. Who decided to put the carp? A picture of you with a carp on the I'm guessing not you.
Not me, but it has to do with how clear the picture was. That salmon one was a lousy picture.
Well, yeah, because the carp is just an awful fish.
Well, that's what they say, but you know, a lot of people eat carp, and the Japanese love to eat carp. It's a highly regarded fish in Japan, in the Orient.
But it is hideous when you pull it out of the water.
It depends on your point of view. I think it's a beautiful fish.
To another carp, it's probably quite attractive. I wanted to, because you talk a lot about fishing and days with your dad and with your mom. Do you know what that did to you in the long term? You watched your mom die very slowly in life support systems. Has the dust settled for you, that experience?
Well, I don't think it ever goes away. I mean, the memories are very vivid, and as I say in the book, once she died, I was astonished that to me life really changed. It's not the same. You've grown up, and you feel a very strong sense of your own mortality. It's a funny thing. My mother was always this presence who was always there. We took her for granted. She was a very traditional Japanese woman who was always in the background, but she was, it turned out, the strength of the family. And you lose your mother, and it's really the underpinnings of the family. It was a very, very difficult thing.
Because you write about the dangers of becoming a personality or a celebrity. One of them you didn't mention that I sometimes think is that if you do this job long enough, almost anything in your life becomes a story idea. Do you know what I mean? You try to, you think of it in terms of, well, now this is this story. Was it hard for you to write the things you did about your mom and dad in here? Or were you a little reluctant to share?
No, that's a funny thing, and maybe that's the extent to which I've become a public persona. But it was something that it was kind of like it poured out of me. I just couldn't help it. It just came out. And I remember writing a column in the Toronto Star, actually, about it. And it just came gushing out. Normally I have a very hard time to write a 1,000-word essay, but my mother's death it came out. I mean, all the anger and all of the frustration. And because what happened with her was that she lost the opportunity for a dignified death. She had had Alzheimer's syndrome for over 4 years. She fell with a massive heart attack and was instantly dead in my father's arms. I mean, you couldn't have asked for more. But 15 minutes later, she was revived and put on a life support system, and then had to go through all of the indignity of dying again.
But did you feel awkward telling that story? I mean, there's another scene where you made your mom cry, and you realized later that all she was trying to find out was whether you were going to be there.
Yeah.
I wonder, I mean, is that too private?
Well, that one I felt I was on the edge. I wept when I wrote that one. And writing a book like this, I realized that I've done a few things of which I'm proud. I've done many, many things of which I'm embarrassed or ashamed. And those things that I've done that were mistakes or bad things, I realized that I'd swept under the rug and not faced. You know, it's very easy to kind of believe what the press says. You're a nice guy and you're fighting for this and that. But when you write a book like this, you suddenly have to confront what you've been and the hurt that you've inflicted on others. And certainly with my first family and with my mother, those things I found really I didn't want to face them.
Well, I want to ask you about some of the hurt that was inflicted on you, because I found it uncomfortable reading about what happened to the Japanese Canadians in the 40s. And one date that sticks out, I marked it down, was August 15th, 1945. The word was the war had ended. You went to buy some fireworks. And I'm uncomfortable saying this, but you wrote it. Somebody kicked you in the rear end and said, it wasn't go away, Jap.
We beat you. Well, I think that's perfectly understandable. After all, the Japanese had been the enemy, and all of the propaganda had said that. So essentially, the whites had viewed us as the enemy. We were no longer Canadians; we were the enemy.
What does that do to you as a kid, though?
Well, I think for everybody that managed to survive, like me, I think there are a lot of people who simply have not come out of it. And I think in the press for reparations, the Japanese Canadians now looking for some kind of compensation, I think you're seeing a lot of that anger that's been repressed all of these years. I at least have had a public platform and have expressed my anger. and have said it. And I wrote that not so that people like you would read it and feel bad or feel sorry for me. That's not the point. I think the really important message there is that democracy is only an idea. And all of the rights and guarantees that are said to reside in a democracy are only as good as people are willing to give it in times of stress. We failed in World War II with Japanese Canadians, but let's not do it again. That's the message.
How comfortable are you with the public platform? I mean, you started out as a devoted teacher, and I think a large part of you still would like to be teaching and working in the lab, but this new thing has sort of taken over.
Well, the autobiography has been a very interesting experience for me. I realize now I am not the public person. I feel that I've spilled my guts out in public view. And the surprising thing is that many of the people who have reviewed the book have said, we want more. You've held back. And from my standpoint, I've given more than really I wish I had. So my inclination now is just to find a hole and dive into it. And yet I'm sucked along because so many people are writing saying, we're being trumped by the government, we're being trumped by this group.
And you're seen as the guy to come along and
the group that I've become very interested in the last few years have been Native people across the country, and my God, there are just endless numbers of people who are begging for attention and help.
So I remember doing a cross-country checkup on CBC Radio with you when Planet for the Taking was out. I think it was after the second or third episode, and I thought that probably half and half people were going to be very critical of you, and I remember being really surprised. A lot of people behind you, and I wonder if you see the gap widening between what the average person has to say about the environment and action and corruption and that, and what the government is willing to do.
Well, I think really the government is quite far behind the public. But I think there's a certain schizophrenia. The public is massively aware that we have enormous environmental problems, and they are willing to pay money to keep wilderness and to keep our environment clean. They know that. At the same time, there's this very strange other side where people feel we must have continued growth in the economy, more material goods, we must have higher incomes and so on. And these are not, they're mutually exclusive. You can't have both. And people have to realize the environment is paying the price for our demand for consumer goods.
There's so much to talk to you about. We're out of time. Thank you very much, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.